Hello, friends. Welcome back. I'm still Brady Ryan. I'm still the manager of the brand new CoMotion Labs hardware incubator on UW's campus, and I'm still very happy that you've all joined us here today. Sadly, this is our last installment of our first ever speaker series aimed directly at hardware entrepreneurs, but we are resuming our normal Friday Fundamental series this Friday, so stay tuned for more info there. Again, you've heard this by now, but CoMotion Labs is a series of co-working and incubation spaces on campus at UW. We work with startups that spin out of UW and startups that come out of some garage somewhere. We just opened a new hardware incubator called Hardware Hall, where I sit right now, but we also have spaces for life science and software with different sets of resources at each space for the different types of companies. Here at Hardware Hall, we have desks and workbenches, shared prototyping equipment that members use for free, conference rooms, phone booths, coffee, and we're building relationships with top-level consultants just like Marco, who's speaking today, so we can plug you in when you need it. We also have mentoring and fundraising help. Whatever you need, we'll try to hunt it down for you. We opened on the 1st of September with 2 companies, and we are welcoming a third company later this week. It is a longtime attendee of this event. I hope he's here, and if so, I hope you'll chime in the chat. Before I hand off to Hans, I do have an ask. One of my startups needs help finding a lab or a shop for sputter coating gold onto PDMS. I don't really know what that means, but hopefully you guys do. If you know someone who does sputter coating around here, please do let me know. Next, I'll introduce you to Hans. Hans is the leader of a fantastic meetup group called the IoT Hub, and he runs a Discord server for the hardware community here in Seattle. If you're not a member of that meetup group or the Discord server, you're doing yourself a disservice. We have links for that, so I hope that you'll join those and get plugged in. Next, Hans, take it from here.
Thank you, Brady. As Brady mentioned, I lead the Seattle-based IoT Hub meetup group. We're a community of technologists, entrepreneurs. We have corporate executives who are members, and it includes people from manufacturing and industrial companies, many of them local. Our goal is to learn how IoT and Industry 4.0 technologies will shape our lives, communities, jobs, and industries. And our members, like I said, represent technology, industrial, and manufacturing companies. Our community has been around for about 4.5 years. We just crossed our 3,900 member, making us one of the largest IoT and industry focused meetup communities in the country. Our meetups cover both the IoT tech side of things, all the buzzwords, edge computing. We're actually putting together a series of events around edge. If you're interested in participating, reach out to me. We also cover a lot of topics very focused on industries, Industry 4.0, if you will, and essentially look at how IoT and Industry 4.0 type of technologies help businesses and consumers. The topics that we've covered in the past include digital manufacturing is actually one of our highest attended events. We're planning on meetups around robotics and industrial automation. Again, if you're interested in speaking in any of those, please reach out. In addition to IoT and Industry 4.0 topics, we also have a lot of members who need to build a hardware, some connected hardware, being IoT. And so last year we decided to put together a series of events, and it's how we ended up meeting Brady and Caroline at CoMotion. In terms of hardware, the good news is the amount of VC dollars going into hardware went up last year. It was over 40%, but 24% of startups never make it to this second round. That compares with 46% for a normal tech startup. So it doesn't look good if you're a hardware entrepreneur, and hopefully we can increase your chances of success with these meetups, and of course the discussion on Discord as well. The goal is really to try and help the meetup community here and essentially create a hardware startup ecosystem that's as deep and wide as our software ecosystem. And I'm very glad that we've partnered with CoMotion. We've had a pretty good 6 weeks. I am sad that this is the last one, but we'll carry on. We'll carry on our meetups, but also, as Brady mentioned, please join the Discord server. We've had some pretty active discussions on there around hardware. There are other channels, IoT, Industry 4.0 type of channels, so please join. You can check out our community on meetup.com by searching for IoT Hub in Seattle. And as Brady mentioned, yeah, actually I mentioned as well, join the Discord server. If you're interested in speaking any of the topics, please reach out. We're always looking for speakers. Welcome anyone interested in sharing their experience. With that, I'll hand it back to Brady.
Thank you, Hans. Yeah, last few announcements. Use the chat. There's been a lot of cool conversations happening in the chat bar on all of these talks. Meet some folks, get networked. So today's our last talk in the hardware series, but on Friday, we're restarting our normal Friday fundamentals. And the speakers is going to be Jim Katsandres, Director of Developer Relations at Bluetooth. And he's going to present latest advancements in Bluetooth technology and its rapid growth in non-consumer devices. So still going to be relevant for hardware folks. All of these talks and all of our fundamentals are archived on the CoMotion website, so check that out if you are looking for some more info. For our full schedule and to register for future events, URL is on the screen, comotion.uw.edu/events. And finally, save the date for our virtual grand opening of Hardware Hall, which will be broadcast live on Wednesday, November 18th at 2 p.m. You'll all receive an invite to join, but it's going to be the same as this YouTube channel right here. So today, Marco Micheletti is here to present Designing and Developing Hardware for Manufacturing and Scalability. Marco is the Automation Director at Fresh Consulting, bringing over 20 years of experience in managing engineering teams. Throughout his career, he has led teams shipping iconic innovations at companies such as Valve and Microsoft. Marco has driven automation, product development, supply chain, and manufacturing for products including the Xbox 360, Nike GPS watch and fuel band, Steam controller, and Steam VR kit. He brings deep expertise and leadership in high-value automation, advanced manufacturing, and autonomous vehicle solutions. He holds a BS in mechanical engineering from the University of Washington. Marco will take questions via chat that I'll pass on or email. Feel free to ask questions throughout the presentation. I'll interrupt him if it's a good time for it. And now I'll turn the event over to Marco.
Hi, Brady. Yeah, thank you. Appreciate the intro and for being here. And thank you to you, Brady, and Hans, and CoMotion for having me today. Like Brady mentioned, we're talking today about designing, developing hardware for manufacturing and scalability. I want to just, Brady gave me a really nice intro. I want to cover a few thoughts around what scale means to me and establish a little bit of a framework for our discussion. And then we should be able to have definitely take some questions at the end. Brady gave me a really great intro. I'm the Director of Automation at Fresh Consulting. He mentioned a lot of the cool things that I've gotten to be. I'm very fortunate to have worked on and had these amazing experiences. Being in the Seattle area, the software town, I feel like I've worked on every major hardware product and project. And that's kind of unique, I think, for me. But as you mentioned earlier, hardware is still growing and is getting to be a larger and larger presence. There's great cycles in the industry that we go back and forth, and great software needs great hardware to run on. And so I'm always optimistic and excited to see the development, especially that comes out of this area for the hardware. A lot of my experience also is based on, I would say, my own personal experience in consumer electronics. So I'm bringing I'm going to talk about a lot of what I've seen from my own personal voyage through hardware development, manufacturing, and supply chain and automation. I want to, throw out a lot of just here's what some of these, here's what scale means to me. Here's examples, again, very consumer electronic point of view, just because that's what I've done and that's what I know. A lot of the numbers, and please don't take things just overly literal because your mileage may vary. Everything's just a little different your product or your service or your industry. And so this is just a little bit of manufacturing and or product development and manufacturing by the numbers. We're going to try to go through some of these and just hit on some high points and distinguishing features. To just looking at the slide here and starting on the left. A lot of these things are things that a lot of you are involved in and what you see and are working on a daily basis when you're making you're a scrappy startup making your first prototype, or you're making a few units to give out for internal testing as you start to polish and think about scale and increase your volumes, and what does that mean for your business in terms of volume and costs and different considerations that you need to think about as an organization, not just a hardware manufacturing team, but as an organization as you continue to build that scale and build your product offering and go out from and transition from the prototype to the beta to the low initial production rate to the fully automated. You're the world beater with your products out there now. So that's a little bit of the perspective I want to discuss from. So, what does designing for scale mean to me? For me, it's an understanding the upfront structure, the effort you put into it, the timing and requirements, and your organizational goals, and to a large degree the costs, which help determine and help you think about when it makes sense to invest in scaling. And I want to use a framework with these elements to explore these different volume points, just so that you can see the different considerations and we can transition between or as we transition through the scaling journey and the development cycle to a degree. So yeah, I'll follow a loose framework for just kind of profiling organizations at different points. Try to call out and just focus not on everything on the screen, but the technologies and the ecosystem elements and partnerships that you should be thinking about at different points in the journey. And again, I've given you kind of my caveats. It's my perspective. Your mileage may vary. Please don't take it as overly literal. There's a lot of variables, and I'm very much trying to oversimplify this. So just as a framework, I want to talk about just the general attributes of what your organization might look like at these different manufacturing or stages of scale. Talk a little bit also about the ecosystem around you, the types of people you're going to be needing to partner with, who's out there and what kind of enabling technologies are there to be leveraged, and a little bit of, again, I can give you some of these things weren't there when we were doing it, and the tools today for a startup have never been better. There's a lot of what you can do. I want to talk and touch a little bit around what I think organizations at different points of the journey are also thinking about in terms of their goals and how that plays into decisions that you make into the manufacturing and scaling space. And then also just try to just have some relative, again, very rough numbers on things that attributes of this organization, which might be your team size, examples of your hardware revenue and the types of investments that you're going to be making, and decision or return on investment timeframes. So this is the context of how I want to step through this. So I'm just starting here with just, hey, we're going to build 5 of something, and we're starting early in this process. And what does your organization really look like? This could be any of the pre-funded folks. You're an early stage startup, or you're starting to come together as maybe you and a potential co-founder, or maybe you're a small engineering team in a large organization, and you're just a really small team that's looking into start and develop new capabilities around hardware and developing a new product or a set of features for something that exists already. This is just one of the areas, like, you know, you see people that you want that are like have the hacker mindset, and you're trying to be scrappy with whatever you can do, because usually you're trying to fund this either out of your pocket or you have very low funds or resources available. And so there's just a ton of amazing, great resources out there to get you started in the space. And it's amazing to me, just you know, the things like the Raspberry Pi, and you know, there's always been dev boards, but the open source you know, software and firmware libraries that you can get onto a dev system just really is a great way to jumpstart development, and always should be the first place you start for prototyping. Along with you know, the kind of places where you're looking and trying to get your components and sourcing, there's just the range of internet sources for component distribution. Everyone knows, you know, their DigiKeys and their McMaster cars. They can get parts the next day. You get almost whatever you want. But today the world is essentially flat for what you can get, whether it's Amazon or Alibaba for custom or semi-custom or off-the-shelf type components. There's just so much out there that might be useful for what you're doing. It's an invaluable resource. You know, the types of the really thing that has, you know, I'll talk about this in the next point as well, but just, you know, it can't be said enough that the capabilities that are being unlocked around you know, 3D printing, additive processes, people that are providing digital manufacturing platforms, the amount of rapid prototyping and even access to machining and equipment that normally would have to be either purchased, or you need access to a lab, or just things that typically wouldn't be out of the range of a very early startup. A lot of these digital platforms and capabilities now are open to the early startup at very reasonable costs. You know, eventually it all does add up and it does cost something, but to be able to have access to a lot of these, you know, quick turn PCBAs, system on chips and pre-qualified modules, you know, commodity priced compute, cloud services. These are really enabling features of what allows hardware companies to kickstart their development, prove their feasibility, and you know, basically accelerate their development. Which again goes to what are the goals of organizations like this? We're obviously just, you know, we have an idea, we have a kernel of what we want to prove out, and these tools are all there to be able to you know, help with early feasibility, demonstrate basic functionality, even potentially de-risk your development as you you know, are formulating thesis and hypotheses around the solution or the problem you're trying to solve, and the solution that you're going to bring to it. And again, you know, everyone knows that you know, the scrappy pre-started, pre-funded, you're working out of your pocket. You have no revenue, you're not driving it, and you want to keep your investment as close to zero as possible. And I've had this discussion a little bit with Brady in the past, which is, you know, these days it's really amazing what you can do probably for less than $1,000 if you're really being scrappy. So I would say that there's a lot of capability available these days for the early startup that's trying to move along. Again, as we kind of move up, and you know, scale is also a metaphor here for you know, maturity. You know, your organization is starting to coalesce, and maybe you're now a formal startup, and you're working on early funding. You have seed funds, and again, you know, this is pretty much the same thing. You're trying to really, you can continue to utilize a lot of these components now, which you know, these enabling technologies in this manufacturing ecosystem to to continue to scale. It used to be that you know, a 3D printed item was great because you could get it fast, but it was so expensive that you couldn't. It wasn't worth paying for them into the hundreds. And nowadays, the proliferation of these technologies has really brought the cost down. And I see that these types of technologies and prototyping technologies are being used as we transition up the scale factor. They're not as fragile as they used to be. They are more robust. There's more materials available. You can get better fit and finishes on mechanical type. You know, that's a lot of talk there, very much about 3D printed, but there's just a lot of things you can do that used to be out of reach in low volume. Designing, you know, if you still put the effort in to design a custom PCBA, you could still send the design out. 3 days later, you can quick turn it and get it back in tens, hundreds, or thousands for really, really reasonable costs. And these are all things that are absolutely enabling startups to reach intermediate points of scale and achieve their goals in quicker time. And you know, and this really helps when you're really trying to get a lot, relatively speaking, hardware into people's hands for showing and demonstrating your functionality and a more robust set of features. You can get that feedback that's super valuable into users' hands. You can use it for fundraising, and so instead of bringing in, it used to be a big deal, like how scrappy could you get with something made out of cardboard or really kludged together, or your dev kit on zip tied down to a benchtop board. You can really put a lot of polish into early stage prototypes because of these capabilities that are now just so widely available, and again, highly cost effective. And again, you're still really a small team here, and you're not really generating hardware based revenue, but now you're really going to need to start investing at least a little bit into these types of prototypes and keep your costs down as much as possible. But as you're ratcheting up, your costs are still really reasonable if you're being really efficient with your money and moving through this step. So as I start thinking more about the maturity of a company, the maturity of a product, you're really starting to get to something that a product that you're trying to approach a public launch. You're a small organization or a company now that you maybe don't have all of the resources and capabilities in place, but you're growing and scaling, and you're starting to think about, how am I going to get this product polished and into more people's hands and really validate a lot of my processes along the way. Again, very, very reoccurring theme here. Some of these, you can start adding polish to your PCBAs. You can start shrinking things down. You can still use a lot of off-the-shelf modules. One thing I haven't really talked too much about is you do want to, as you start to get into productization, you want to mature your firmware or software as needed. You want to start thinking about, now you have a lot of, if you're using off-the-shelf type products, you may start thinking about down the road where you need to address costs and use and find the key partnerships and component providers that you've proven are effective in your feature set earlier in your earlier steps, and now you're starting to look for these partnerships for key suppliers, key manufacturing partners, where they can start bringing scale of volume that you can't achieve in these types of numbers in-house, because you're still just really a small organization, and you need to keep an eye out for the future on how you're going to leverage these companies to take you to the next points in the scale. And again, the types of goals with these devices, now you're really trying to do your beta testing, more widely available types of feedback. You really want to make sure that you have validated your engineering and design, and that you have a product that will withstand manufacturing.
Hey, Marco, we lost your audio. I still cannot hear you. Still no. See, guys, this is a software glitch. It's not a hardware glitch. Just want to be very clear to our listeners. The hardware holds up just fine. Still don't have you, Marco. Ooh, this is a peek behind the curtain, everybody. That's what our switcher looks like. Still no, Marco. Oh, here's something. Yep, I got you now.
All right, let's just call that a software glitch, and the reason why you should be transitioning to some customized firmware and software for your product, because you can't rely on it always when it's open source.
That was smooth. I love it.
Yeah, so again, your goals are your beta testing, your engineering validation. You're trying to find issues just like this. And again, before you've really moved into spending a lot of money and capital, you want to keep a lot of flexibility, and so you can pivot if you need to, because organizations and hardware especially, you need to be agile. And again, a lot of these manufacturing ecosystem technologies and capabilities really do help you avoid making or necessitating early capital investment. And when I think about early capital investment, we're still talking about less than $100,000 potentially. But as if you are considering putting 5,000 units out into the field as an example, and it's a limited pre-launch, or maybe you're doing a Kickstarter, you are at this point going to have to invest, whether it's assembly fixtures, customized test. These are all investments that you're going to have to make regardless. You may not see an immediate ROI, but you need these in place just to be able to start to enable scale and make sure that you have the right quality checks and the right processes that match the expectations for the volume point, as well as the market and your customers. Still good, Brady?
Still good.
Great. So here's an interesting area. I find volumes in the 5 to 50,000. I don't know how to think about it, because it can go a couple ways. You could be really an upstart that you're really trying to shoot through this range as quickly as you can. This might be your first year type of expectations. You're still building your organizations. Maybe you have a high unit cost, and 50,000 units a year is exactly where you want to be. Maybe you're a medical device. But I think of this, and kind of the picture on the right depicts it as this is about the time where you want to invest in some fixed infrastructure, some fixed capital expense, tools like single cavity tooling. This is where you really are looking at your who are the partners that are doing prototype tooling, really quick. Again, keeping you flexible, but also, minimizing and trying to have low capital investments. Still really trying to be, open to pivoting if you find that you get feedback that something just didn't work. But now's the time really to start thinking about, as you move into this range, who are your key manufacturing partners that are going to help you scale? Are you going to do it local or onshore? Are you going to do it offshore? There's a lot of considerations here based on the goals that your organization provides, and those will help drive who you're going to partner with in your ecosystem. So again, like maybe the scenario is, hey, we're going to go out with a public launch this year. It's our first product out on the market. We're not 100% sure if we're going to make it or not. Hardware is hard, and I've been a part of these startups that have that have kind of not made it past this point. So you still need to be smart with your capital investments. And again, your cost structure. Just go back to think about it. To be able to get into, if you are going to hit a continued run rate on those higher ends of say 50,000 units a year or more, and again, these numbers are just assuming like $100 type of BOM, but you are going to need to really start investing and take some risks in the amount of capital invested into your manufacturing space, because you are going to need hard tools at this point. Maybe you don't need the full up 16, 32 cavity high volume stuff that you're going to use for doing 10 million units a year. But if you have a number of tooled parts, whether it's metal or machined or injection molded, they are going to start to add up. The things that always also you just have to have in place is a strong end of line manufacturing test, whether you're automated or not. But you need to have test development that's in place and capable of ensuring your product goes out into the field. That's going to again meet the customer's expectations in terms of quality and reliability. And so you do start to see serious investments in the hundreds of thousands of dollars in the type of capital that you're going to have to deploy. And you are, based on those investments, really going to start looking at what does my ROI look like? All of this might still be a fairly high amount of risk to take on, but part of what you're trying to do is say, we're making a bet. We're making a bet that if we hit our volume productions, if we can sell the devices that we're trying to make, we hit our high volume marks, we're going to hit our ROI on these investments. And so, those are things that you'll be able to start recouping that money, and how you plan your hardware margins and business considerations around that. These are considerations to start taking into account. As we move up, your tooling again I'm thinking about these volume points very right now mechanically and tooling based, because as you're growing, you may not still have that fully built out organization, but now you have a little bit of market success to build on, and maybe you have some of this trajectory that says, okay, we are starting to get a track record. We definitely need to think about the next range of scale. We're going to have to invest more, and it's not as risky. And so the manufacturing ecosystem now really starts to expand, and it's, now it gets really interesting. These key supply relationships that you've established, you want to start looking at possibly your cost down programs, trying to, if you've overspec'd your device because it helped you develop quickly, now you're carrying a burden of cost possibly into higher volume marks. And just in general, to be able to hit higher volume, you're going to need to look at a wider array of partnerships and organizations, whether they're helping you with product design, strategic component suppliers that you are getting strategic deals in place for your key components, consolidating maybe some of your manufacturing, or looking for second sources. This is really the time to do it. And again, your organizational goal to step out of the manufacturing space, you have this success you're trying trying to build on. You're out in the market, and now's the time that you're trying to raise your brand and visibility, and try to take advantage of if you've been successful in these early bets. And again, there's always a mindset that you're going to have to be low cost and efficient, and that can't persist. Inefficient cost structures can't persist into high scale, and that's where your capital expenses really start to increase, because you're basically making a trade-off that I'm trying to lower my BOM cost, whether it's through smarter selection of components, more efficient assembly processes, or just more volume. You are going to have to really start paying for that, and not in a bad way, but the way that you counteract these is by being smart about your capital expenditure and your tooling. If you're able to match your outputs to your tooling capacity, it makes sense to start going up in capitation. It might make sense to start looking at the overseas lower cost region for components or sub-assembly processes. And again, you're definitely now keeping an eye for what your ROI is going to look like as you start to invest, potentially millions of dollars into your manufacturing operation to get these set up and really set you up to continue your growth. So again, this is, I think, when you start to get to this, right in the middle here, kind of like the 1 million units a year. I consider this really one. It's a great sign of success. Not that some of the lower points might have been exactly where you want, but this, I think, just in most folks' mind, like 1 million units a year is you're starting to enter the big leagues, and you're starting to get into the upper tier of the manufacturing ecosystem. And if you're making that many units a year, your organization is going to need to adapt and be mature to have a lot of the supporting functions. When you think about a full quality department, maybe your engineering disciplines are really broken out into different organizations. Maybe you have an actual NPI team, a manufacturing team, and so this in my mind is sometimes like if you're making a 1 million to 5 million Xboxes a year or PlayStations, like those are all things that really are in this tier with a lot of other products from big name companies. And so you're just really moving up into this manufacturing ecosystem again, where now you really need to have the partnership solidified that you went out and the folks that brought you there are you're expanding on those. You have more critical component suppliers. You're really focused on, again, cost and quality. Assembly and test can just never be overlooked, and you're building out a more robust, logistics and supply chain that will support your customers in the field. And so all of a sudden, you're not just focused on getting your product out into the market. You have to think about how you're caring for the products that are in the field and supporting your customers as your products are out there. And so again, the scope of your ecosystem will continue to grow. And again, not that you should be ignoring this at other areas, but again, these are just, again, factors that you really need to pay attention to as you're going through the journey. Again, your organizational goals might be, your Microsoft and Sony battling it out against Xboxes and PlayStations. You're probably in a really competitive marketplace, and and your development cycles are really important to get to market before your competitor, get a better set of features out there. You're really competing. You're trying to be innovative in a lot of the offerings, potentially, like the different business models and service offerings along with hardware, like Chris previously talked about. You're really focused now on improving financials because you're at such a high level of scale that your hardware cost structure is driving significant monetization and revenue through your organization. Your team is growing. Again, you could get a lot done with tens and 20s of people, but you're probably now in north of 100 people into your organization, and again, revenues, you might be at $500 million, maybe even more at this point, easily, with higher bond costs into $2 or $3 billion, and you're spending, millions, tens of millions, sometimes in your investments, and you want to make sure that you are now making smart decisions. You can make these investments because you have the track record, and that your investment maybe in development earlier is going to enable a product life cycle that goes for 3, 4, or 5 years. And the more efficient you can be at the end of that life cycle, the more you're going to contribute to margin for your company. And so it gets to be very very tricky on how you spend this money in your capex to again bet on the things that will work, still trying to possibly maintain some flexibility, but knowing that these decisions all have very serious bottom line financial impact as you're making them, because now we're talking about mature hardware organizations with dependencies across the organization for financial results.
Marco, a question about that scale, and I guess probably into the scale that you're getting to on this next slide, especially the next slide. How many of the companies that you see operating at that scale are, formerly startups, at least, right? They were a founder or two founders that have kind of scaled it organically, versus how many of those really high volume companies are, big legacy players, Microsoft, Sony, et cetera?
I can think of like a small handful. It's a great question. The ones that come to mind are like the drop cams, maybe like Wise Labs is locally starting to achieve that. I'm not sure where they are in scale, but maybe starting to approach the lower end. Fitbit, Jawbone, Fitbit were all kind of scrappy startups, venture funded in the beginning. I was going to say, I like to think that when we started the hardware team for the first Xbox, that we were a startup too, but we just had, someone writing $1 billion checks. And so not the same thing.
That helps.
Yes, it does. It helps. And we did approach it from a really scrappy standpoint, from a small team, but we grew really fast. But the success story, I mean, I'm sure Peloton, those are the ones that are succeeding these days. I would just go back to what Hans said. It's hard. A lot don't make it. There's so many more that don't. And as an aside, and I've been a part of 2 of them that didn't make it past like maybe B. So I've been there. It takes a holistic approach to really be successful. I used to really think that, when I was a very young and naive engineer, hardware and design would win out, but it's not always. It's that ability to also have product market fit, be at the right place at the right time, be able to maintain flexibility. I've said flexibility a few times, and I think whether you're reducing risk to your business through hardware and how you invest in maintaining and being scrappy is really an important thing. There's a kind of a summary slide here where it might kind of might hit on it a little bit more. But it's a number of factors that will take you to be one of those people that have made it into them. And again, it's what's the other GoPro? You know, like guys like that, right? Like it's hard. It's really hard, and you got to hope that either you've done everything right and you can be one of those shining examples, or you're going to have to figure out how to adapt and pivot until you can make it and figure out what the right way is. Yeah, I mean, these really high volumes, these aren't the scrappy startups. I mean, it's the Fortune 100, and this is where this end of the scale, you know, I wanted to talk about it here. I know that a lot of times we're focused on the startups, but you know, these are the big boys, and it's worth pointing out just again the change, I think, in focus on how they approach some of these things. You know, these have these just, you know, mature organizations that are just armies and armies of people. They have staggered development programs and cycles that are like 5 years long because they're investing, you know, they're buying companies, they're developing their own IP, and they're making a lot of investment up front. They're partnered with the biggest invest tier one type of manufacturers. They're driving those manufacturing partners to develop the technologies to assemble their products, because the OEMs, the companies, are really what's pushing the limits in the technology here. You know, obviously, to hit these numbers, you need a lot of scale and a lot of automation. Again, these longer development cycles, and they're iterating on each other, and they're really planned out. You know, these folks are trying to dominate their market and leverage their brand position and tie in services and make their capital expenditures, you know, which are easily into the billions of dollars, get a return on those. And sometimes they're not even returning within the cycle of the first product. It might take several product generations for IP investments to pay off. So these timelines are now have gone out like 5 and 10 years, and so these just the horizons are longer, and the investment and risk is larger, and these companies really are trying to again leverage their market position to make sure that those investments pay off. And to a degree, when you look at folks like, you know, Apple or Samsung, and you know, Apple investing in processors and their own design, with some of the acquisitions, you see them do a lot of this really strategically. They take a small company in, and then you may not see anything about it for 4 or 5 years until that really becomes well integrated into their product offering. And so there's a lot of patience, but they also have the scale now to really change the game, and these you know, risks and investments are they help them maintain those dominant market positions. So actually, yeah, we're really getting close to wrapping up here, and so why is a lot of this important? You know, these enabling technologies that help you develop and manufacture will try to help you actually be a little more successful in mitigating your risk if you're trying to avoid investment up front, help you optimize your design, optimize or pivot your offering as you scale. And here's just maybe a couple like examples of how, you know, different scenarios might work for different people. You know, you have a lot of low cost and cheap compute with the processors. You have a lot of, we didn't talk too much about the cloud services, but if you're developing and you really need low cost, and you get, you know, a lot of compute power, you're able to really jumpstart again your development cycle. You can overspec your you know, using a processor that isn't optimized for power, cost, or board footprint, and you can get a lot of capability built into your device early in your development cycle, so that you can, do that feasibility, adjust your products or features as you need it. And again, there's the tools that are available as through the cloud, which is not my area of specialty, but you combine hardware with cloud services, and there's a lot that you can do in terms of putting together a really robust product offering really early in your development cycle and for not a lot of money. Just some of these other enabling factors, like there's a big movement in local manufacturing and bringing your supply chain on shore, and you might pay a little bit more for it, but there's some great trade-offs that I've gone through with other companies on this, which are you're not tying up your capital as long in a long supply chain with product coming from Asia potentially. Since your supply chain's closer and smaller, you have a lot of flexibility in being able to potentially change if issues come up. You can potentially get to market faster because you just don't have as long a lead times to sending components to Asia, waiting for them to get assembled and then coming back on a ship. And these days, geopolitical risk around tariffs or just trade wars has been a real thing, and this has always been in the back of minds of people in the strategic sourcing space. But it's the last 3 or 4 years, it's been front and center, and it's something that you have to take into consideration on how you plan your go-to-market manufacturing strategy. And again, just talking about the different types of organizations that are now available and the digital manufacturing platforms and part distribution, you can gain a lot of leverage across a manufacturing ecosystem. You don't have to be the startup that goes and knocks on the door of Foxconn or, I need to have a strategic deal with Intel. A lot of these components are available through the distribution ecosystem. Or you can leverage your manufacturing partners, and so you get a lot of leverage when you're lower in the volume point. These mid scale points. It really gives you a lot of leverage again into that space where you don't need to spend the time and effort to have a lot of manufacturing, just critical manufacturing type relationships. And again, on the high end, automation is a big deal. If you're established and you have these really long product cycles, you're able to really now use those investments. You have a lot of time to lower the cost. You get a lot of ability to control your quality through repeatability, and you have a huge market based on your brand recognition. You're international, and so this really gives you, even though you're spending a lot of money up front for these investments, your access to the markets now is equally large, and that's one of the key factors that will allow you to recoup and gain that return on your investment. So that's pretty much it for today. Those are my viewpoints, kind of going through these different the different areas of scale where, a lot of it is just, what can you do? What tools do you have to get your product out? You need to survive. You need to, get to market and still have the right partnerships in place to have a high quality product. And then as you're transitioning and hopefully you're successful in doing that, you're able to go out and continue to find the right relationships in the industries to enable to hit more and more volume and hit these different points of scale.
Yeah, that was amazing. Thank you for that. I'm brand new to hardware, and it was a little bit easier to kind of grasp the difference between hardware and software entrepreneurship, in just kind of the design and figuring out how everything works, and then just layering on manufacturing on top of all of that. It's just there's all these doors of complexity.
Yeah.
And really appreciate this. And it seems like you've seen this process at all stages and all scales, and I'm wondering what horror stories you have, what you've seen where things kind of go wrong in that, either in the manufacturing process or how poor DFM led to bad outcomes. But any horror stories you've got?
Well, there's always the time when you take the process that's just not quite ready, and it's you're trying to scale at the same time, and you're just throwing people at it until you can really, and that's just one of the things you really hate to see, because I think I would say manufacturing done well it's not always about just throwing bodies at it. It's being efficient with how you do it, and developing the processes along with your products so that they can be manufactured efficiently. I do remember one time we were, it wasn't that the process wasn't quite ready. It was just we weren't mature enough, and we had our manufacturing test images that we had to get into the factory, and you're early in production, so your images are changing almost daily, and you need to get this software onto the device to be able to run it down the line and program and test. And we didn't have the VPN solution, piped into China yet, because there's issues with the Great Firewall. And so to overcome that challenge, we were bringing suitcases full of DVDs, on weekly trips to the factory from the US. And sometimes we'd have two people, one go from Shanghai and one go from Hong Kong, and try to, let's meet at the factory as fast as we can to try to get those in place. And that's clearly not a scaling process, but it's one of those things that you do sometimes just to get it done. And as soon as you come home, they say, "Oh, we have the next image. Come into the office, get the next 100 discs, and get back on the plane."
Oof, yeah. Well, another reason to manufacture locally, I guess, makes that a little bit easier. So yeah, folks, any questions you have, throw them in the chat. We're going to start chewing through some of these. Harmon Baines wants to know, are there any roadblocks or common issues, including regulatory issues, that folks should watch out for when trying to sell low volume hardware online? He says it seems almost too easy and thinks he might be missing something. Yeah,
I would say that there are, regulatory is important. You can't, at some point that's where I think partnering with somebody in that space, you're a small organization, you can go build and make something look really nice and actually, do a great job, and it can meet all of your needs and solve a problem in the market space. But you definitely need to make sure that you are consulting with the right type of regulatory experts to know that. And again, that's not something that a small organization will typically have. I've gone through several cycles of product regulatory certifications, and I have a general sense of the types of things you need to worry about when it's a wireless device and you need to pass FCC, and you need to register with the FCC. You need to have markings and safety testing. All of these things are things that you have to consider and have in your development plan. And if you don't have that expertise on hand, you need to go out and find somebody to look at your device and point you in the right direction. There's lots of, it's an industry, right? The regulatory consulting industry is there to help you, and they're the right people to consult with.
Does Fresh do any of that, or are there good regulatory consultants in town?
There are definitely good regulatory. We don't do that. We would partner as well. We have a lot of expertise in folks that have done this, like myself.
Oh, lost your sound again. Give me a check.
How about now?
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, yeah, the computer just decided to turn me off. We do a lot of testing at folks. I think they're called Elemental now. There's UL Labs has an office down in Camas, Washington. They, Intertech, TUV. There's a lot of these different regulatory bodies, and then they have there's other related organizations that do the testing. They have the consulting services as well, or maybe if they do the testing, they can't have the consulting. But there's a lot of people in that industry.
Okay.
UL, Intertech, Elemental.
Robert B wants to kind of talk about the risk trade-off of leveraging open source software and applications with communications and sensor platforms. Is that worth shortening the development cycle for the kind of increased risk, or how do you approach that?
Yeah, I had a small line about that. I think that open source software is great for getting your devices off the ground, but I wouldn't launch a product with it, to put it bluntly. There was a point in there where if you are going to product launch, I personally would, spend that effort to develop the custom software, firmware that you are going to own and your product relies on, because you're opening yourself up to potential risks or other influences that are outside of your control. So
what are those risks? Is it security risk because more folks have poked around on it, or is it the open source software is somehow going to disappear and you lose?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just, it could be all of those. It could be anything. I don't want to speak, I'm not trying to speak badly about anything open source, because you can get a lot done, and maybe in the right situations, it's the right thing to do. There's obviously a lot of open source development platforms that then custom code is, are used in the, used in the development process. But it's really more, when I think about it, it's really more about control of your own destiny. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Time for, well, we're already over, but we'll do a quick one. Alvaro wants to know, how hard is it to deal with the hardware certification processes and how to prepare for that? You kind of spoke to the folks in town that are there. Is that just another hurdle, or is that a significant thing that is going to require a lot of planning and foresight and
more towards the latter? It's a significant, and again, it depends on what your device is. If you're a flashlight type of thing, that's pretty simple. You may just not need to do any type of third party. If you're, especially if you're going into European markets, there's more standards around product testing and certification as well. And so most people will test to European standards, the CE type of tests. But I would say just generally for a wireless IoT type device, yes, you need to plan, like battery powered or plug in, either way, you need to plan and have a concerted effort around that, because there's, it's not even good enough to say that, oh, I used a wireless module that's already certified online. Like, that's a great tool that gets you part of the way there, but that's not the full solution.
Okay.
And so talking to experts in that area will be able to advise you.
Yeah, there are people that know this stuff. Well, that's just about all we have. Marco, thank you so much for this. Somebody did ask how to best get a hold of you. If folks want to reach out, is that LinkedIn? We can share your email address?
Yeah, marco.micheletti@freshconsulting.com. That's a lot of words and letters there. Maybe something you can share out, or here. Yeah. There we go. marco.micheletti@freshconsulting.com. And feel free to reach out to me, of course. You can also, if you go to our website, download any of our white papers or resources. You can use the fill-in form and also use that to reach out. And I know that it doesn't go into the ether. Our marketing folks will direct those back to me as well.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for the time, and thank you to everybody that attended. This was the last of 6, but there's going to be a lot more events that we do that'll be relevant for you hardware entrepreneurs out there. Starting this Friday, Jim Katsandries, the director of developer relations at Bluetooth, presenting latest advancements in Bluetooth technology and its rapid growth in non-consumer devices. So hopefully, if anybody's thinking about using Bluetooth in their devices, this will be useful. So sign up for that, and we'll see you next week. Again, thanks to everybody who joined along on this adventure of ours, figuring out how hardware works and how to find really smart speakers to talk about it. We thought that these talks were all fantastic. We will be sending you a survey to hear your thoughts, also hear about other topics you want covered, other speakers that you think would be great. But again, thank you so much. I'll talk to you all soon. And if anybody wants to hear more about the incubator and maybe thinking about moving in, shoot me an email and I'd be happy to talk to you. All right, everybody. Bye.